Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Your Football Opinion. I am your host, Theo Ash, and I am coming at you live in the aftermath of the season opener. The Chiefs defeat the Ravens 27-20 in a thrilling, not a back and forth affair, but a affair where the Ravens were able to scratch and claw and come within a millimeter of making it a game at the end. They weren't necessarily 1 inch away, I guess, from winning. They were more like 74 because they would have needed the 2 yards on the 2-point conversion, right? So, they still got pretty close, not to nitpick. I will be talking all about that game with Anthony Lawson today. ESQ Anthony, as I know him on TikTok. A lot of you guys are probably familiar with my TikTok and therefore probably also his if you get NFL content on your For You page at all. He's great. I'm excited to talk with him about our biggest takeaways from this game. It's tempting to talk all about it right off the bat, but I'm going to wait till he's on and you'll hear what we think then. But I will say something I'm not going to talk about later that I will say right off the bat about this game. I was very frustrated with the refereeing right off the bat. Let me complain. There were holding calls on Rashee Rice and Tyler Linderbaum that were not holding calls. Like there was just no jersey grabbed on some scrambles from Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, respectively. And then I don't know about all these illegal formation penalties. I get it, I guess. There needs to be 7 people on the line of scrimmage at the beginning of each play. That's the rules. Nelson Aguilar got an illegal formation at one point because he wasn't on the line of scrimmage as a wide receiver. Usually one guy on each side is on, one is off. And they were both off. That looks weird to me. Usually one guy is always supposed to be on, right? So, yeah, throw the flag. I'm not used to it. But what the offensive linemen are starting to do or have started to do or have always been doing, I guess it's an old thing, is, yeah, they're supposed to be on the line of scrimmage, but it's just kind of inherent with being an offensive lineman that you are. So the tackles have kind of crept back farther and farther and farther in anticipation of edge rushers trying to win around their outside shoulder. And the farther they kind of creep back, the easier it is to get in there to set. And I think the less of a danger that is. But this year, the NFL said, okay, you guys have gone far back enough. This is getting ridiculous. Move back forward to beyond the midpoint of your center, right? You have to be above his waist, above his butt. And if not, we'll call it. And they did. And they certainly did. And I guess it's not that big of a deal. Like, just scooch forward, dude. It was still driving me crazy, though, over the course of the broadcast. But I guess it's valid. I mean, the Chiefs were able to understand the rule, it seemed. Even Jawan Taylor, who gets flagged for 1 million pre-snap penalties and pushes the limits as far as they can go, didn't get called for illegal formation. He got called for a false start, but not illegal formation. But the holding calls really got to me. They did. And the burning of timeouts in the middle of the second half, that got to me as well. I don't think I'll talk about that later. But we'll talk about schemes and players and stuff when Anthony is on. For now, in the first half of the show, I want to talk about some of the players we're going to see on Sunday. I'm talking about the young quarterbacks early and my expectations for their debut performances. Pretty simple concept, and let's get right to it with the Panthers versus the Saints. What to expect from Bryce Young? Well, I think it'll look better under Dave Canales. I think there's a very easy button that you can push if you're the Panthers, and that is more play action, which they hardly ran at all last season. They were very shotgun heavy. They did not line up under center, and they did not run play action from under center very much at all. I think Canales is going to come in and fix that immediately. And it's such an easy fix. It's something they should have been doing. Play action is just statistically proven over decades of research now, or decades of accumulations of stats, to be the more explosive formation to pass from because of the play action. Under center, these dropbacks are so long, the linebackers have to come up and fill so severely that there is just wide open spaces for these receivers. And it doesn't take very many of them to release into the route to be explosive. You can have the tight ends blocking, really sell it. The yards per route run for under center receivers is like over 4. It's such an efficient play. And yards per route run from shotgun, when there are a lot more routes going kind of a shorter distance, the yards per route run is between 1 and 2 somewhere. So you are getting a lot more bang for your buck on a route from under center because of the play action, because of the stress and how that contorts defensive coverage, than you are going from pistol or shotgun all the time. And that's exactly what the Panthers were doing last year. I also think it can help out your running game. Gun runs, I do like a little bit better because I think you're more likely to not get you can spread to run a little bit more from the gun. I feel like you can create bigger creases by, spreading out. But under center can do some things as well. You can run more wide zone, which is kind of the meta in the league today. Kind of tough to do that from shotgun, although you can do it from pistol, which the Panthers did do a lot of last year. But at any rate, I think that plus the addition of Deontay Johnson, plus the addition of Xavier Legette, both of whom I think are good receivers. Deontay Johnson because of his separation ability, Legette because of his ability with the ball in his hands and his contested catch rate down the field. He's a little bit in the Christian Watson mold, I'd say, where it's like, yeah, give him a few end arounds, give him a few go balls. He can be explosive, but I don't know if his route tree will be crazy right away. But the two of them, Johnson and Legette, are good enough at their respective thing that I think the two of them can make a good duo. I'm expecting more 12 personnel to go along with the heavier under center looks. I'm expecting more production spread out to the backs. They hardly caught anything last year. I think Canales coming from an offense that just utilized Rashad White heavily in the receiving game. We'll do a little bit better job getting the backs involved. It hardly happened last year for the Panthers. So everything is looking better. Everything is looking like, okay, we can actually get perhaps a better look at what Bryce Young looks like. However, I don't know if it'll come week 1 because, as I explained in my record prediction series, I'm very high on the Saints defense. I'm very, very high. This is a team that can just play man coverage. And yeah, Deontay Johnson is good. Xavier Legette, I think, will be good. The Saints defenders are better. The Saints defenders are better. And I think that it will kind of be understandable if it's a similar situation to last year in this particular game against this particular defense, where, yeah, Bryce Young is dropping back and there's still no separation. You got Chase Young on Ike Ekwonu. I don't like that matchup. I think it's still going to be tough sledding. I don't think it's going to be quite the disaster as last year, but it's still not an amazing wide receiver room going up against maybe the most talented man coverage group in the NFL. Versus the Panthers in the past, Dennis Allen has forced a defensive EPA of 0.17 per pass. That's a good number to be at. That means, almost 0.2 of a point are coming off the board every time the Panthers pass against Dennis Allen. That if you can imagine that starting to accumulate, it's not good. I think they've scored a touchdown against the Saints on like 11% of their drives. If you're scoring 1 in every 10 tries, it's not a good place to be. And I don't know if this offensive core is good enough where I think they can completely flip the script on the Saints. What I'm hoping for from Bryce, some nice throws over the middle. I think that's another thing Canales can bring is a little bit more focus to that area of the field. And I think that Bryce Young, even as a smaller guy, can be pretty impressive accessing that area. So I'm hoping for a few moments where that shines through. A few moments where he does create. He doesn't always look too small or too skinny to break a tackle or avoid a tackle. And if there's enough of those and combined with like a pick, a moment where he just spikes the ball into the turf or throws it away because things are covered up downfield, the offense isn't very explosive, right? There's maybe some 3 and out. Like if it's kind of ugly over the course of the day, with just some nice moments and you avoid the 7 sack performance or the 3 interception performance or something like that, I'm calling it fine from Bryce Young. If it's like 11 for 23 for 170 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 pick, like just a boring bad game is kind of my expectation here. Nothing too disastrous, but also don't have crazy high hopes for the Panthers moving the ball against the Saints defense. We won't be able to see Drake May, unfortunately. My expectation for him is he sits and learns a lot, nods along. Let's move on to Caleb Williams versus the Titans. My expectation is probably a little bit higher than it is for Bryce, considering I think that Caleb Williams is simply the more talented player. And his receiving core is definitely a notch or 2 notches or maybe even 3 notches above where the Panthers are at, maybe even 4. But with that being said, I don't think the Titans are going to be some simple defense to move the ball on. As excited as everybody is about the Bears wide receivers, I think you can get maybe not just as excited, but pretty close to what the Titans defense or secondary specifically looks like. They spent a ton of money on Snead, who was top tier last season. Owuzie has been good when he's healthy. I'm excited about Roger McCreary in the slot. I think that they can cause some serious problems for Caleb Williams in his first career game. Jeffrey Simmons up front too, against a Bears interior offensive line that got punked by Kenny Clark the last time we saw them. I mean, Jeffrey Simmons has never been an Aaron Donald type force over the course of an entire season. He hasn't had that kind of consistency, but he has been that kind of force over the course of a game. Like, he will kill you if you do not have the interior people to match up with his brute force. Like, he is an absolute monster. So when it's a Jeffrey Simmons game, it's a Jeffrey Simmons game. I could see that being kind of the reality of this first matchup. They're going to probably drop back and pass a lot with the personnel that they have. And yeah, if you give Simmons opportunities to tee off, he could punish Nate Davis and company, Tevin Jenkins and company. That combined with the secondary, I don't think it'll be easy for Caleb, but you can't help but remember what you saw in the preseason, the way he's able to miraculously fit a ball in, the way he's able to create a couple moments of magic over the course of a game to break it open. I mean, think about what Lamar looked like tonight. Chris Jones wrecked the game, I'd say. There wasn't a lot of separation down the field, but you can still kind of will your way to the end zone with creation ability if it's good enough. And Caleb does have that. And it is the Titans, okay? It's their favorites. They should be able to move the ball a little bit. As good as this Titans secondary is, I do think over the course of 4 quarters, it should be expected that the Bears eventually get the upper hand in the passing game and create just enough explosives. But if it's not perfect, if it's even a little bad, like the EPA on rbsdm.com is in the red a little bit for Caleb, as long as it's not too bad, like, I'm willing to forgive it, because I really do think that this Titans defense is going to be legit this year. Defensive coordinator, Denard Wilson, of course. He has a defensive backs background. He's been a defensive backs coach forever. I can't really ascertain any kind of tree that he's from. He started off with Jeff Fisher with the Rams back in like 2012. He was with the Jets for a while. He was with the Eagles. He was with the Ravens last year. But it seems as though he's going a bit the Jonathan Gannon-y type route with his tendencies in the preseason. There was a lot of quarters or quarter half. That was what Gannon did at the highest rate in the league. So maybe something like that I could see based on just what I've seen from their preseason zone numbers. It's, the meta for a reason. It's moldable. Playing from depth, you can kind of react to what you're seeing in front of you, and it can match all kinds of route concepts. It can be successful. Play it with maybe a cloud for Snead. Let him kind of jam people, and then who knows what it could look like. But we won't know until the first game. But I am intrigued. I am intrigued by everything they got going on. I'm intrigued by Wilson's background with a multitude of different defensive philosophies and coaches. I think it'll be good stuff. And I think Caleb will have to kind of scratch and claw for production. But I do think that he will show enough to win the game, unlike what I think from Bryce Young. There's another young quarterback playing here. It is Will Levis. And man, it is shaping up to be quite the experience with this Tennessee offense, I think. Brian Callahan is coming from an offense in Cincinnati with a 36.5% run rate last year. They are not very balanced. Okay, they like to pass it. Their run rate in the Vrabel era was 45.7%, so basically 10% higher of a run rate, which makes sense, right? They had Derrick Henry, he's out the door now. Callahan in Cincinnati had a 7% max protect rate. Vrabel was at 12.4%. So this was an offensive line that's really struggled last year with the extra bodies of a max protect. Now they're going to be asked to pass protect at a higher rate with less help. And Will Levis, his average depth of target last year, 10.3 yards down the field. He's pushing it past the sticks on an average pass. That was the highest rate in the league. He went deep on almost 50% of his pass attempts. 50. He's at 48.2. So it's shaping up to be kind of crazy, I think. They won a bidding war for Calvin Ridley. They shipped Derrick Henry out of town. Is the plan really to let Will Levis cook to an insane degree? Because that's kind of what it's shaping up like to me. And how is that going to look against a top tier secondary, which I believe the Bears have with Tyreek Stevenson and Jalen Johnson and Brisker and Kyler Gordon and whatnot? If this seems like the kind of game where that secondary can really tee off. They are very comfortable in this Matt Eberflus scheme at this point in time. And Levis, he can make some really high-end throws, definitely. Like, he has a crazy arm. He's willing to hold in the pocket for a long time. And when he's on, no doubt. But I also think that if Caleb is starting to score and like they have to, well, maybe they'll just start like they have to throw their way back into the game from the very beginning. There's also the potential for a lot of picks here. So my expectation with Levis is like, how about this? Throw picks, sure, fine. But you also got to score touchdowns. All right, I want to see numbers on the board all across the spectrum. It's interceptions, sacks, as long as the explosive play rate is at the very top of the league, which it has the potential to be. I mean, 10.3%, you got all these weapons, they're going to air it out. I mean, it seems like Callahan wants to press the most efficient buttons, and the most efficient button is to drop back and pass the football down the field. Those are usually your best plays in an ideal offense. Now, I don't know if this is an ideal offense, but I feel like that's the direction that they're going. So I don't know. I think I want a Theo Ash NFL Madden stat line: 6 picks, 6 touchdowns, 400 yards. Will they win? I don't know. It may be zero touchdowns, 4 picks, and they don't score any points against this Bears secondary. But I'm hoping for just some video game numbers from Levis this season. I don't know if it'll happen, but that's what I want to see. Who else? Let's talk about Anthony Richardson. He's a second-year guy. We haven't seen much of him though, so he's pretty much a rookie. I don't think that the Colts will beat the Texans week 1. I think Stroud is just too good. I think Dell and Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs are just too good. I think Gus Bradley plays too much cover 3, and everybody knows what to expect. And I can see it now. Tank Dell up the seam, just like he was in that preseason touchdown against the Steelers. Like, oh, it's cover 3 buzz. Oh, here we go. And Stroud knew exactly what he was, and he just threw a strike to Tank Dell, and he made the free safety miss, and now it's a touchdown. Like, I think there's going to be, I think Stroud is going to put up crazy numbers. I don't know if Anthony Richardson is going to keep pace, but I'm hoping that at least maybe at the beginning of the game, it looks like he can. Like the opening script for the Colts. We're going to see the RPOs. We're going to see the read option with Taylor and Richardson, and we're going to see the four verts that they like to call to let Richardson show off that arm and open up a ton of space underneath for him to run. And I'm hoping that when they're kind of playing the hits and when they're on early, they're moving the ball up and down the field and they're just putting points on the board to at least make it at the beginning seem like a game. Now, eventually, I think Stroud and this Texans offense might be a little bit too much to keep pace with without a few mistakes. But I think to begin the halves, to begin the game, like Steichen can script it up with the best of them. I'm hoping that the running attack looks like a better version of what we've seen from the Ravens so far this season. Lamar obviously scrambled a lot and picked up a ton of yards, but the handing it off to Henry part wasn't the most efficient game one. Jonathan Taylor is potentially better than Henry. He's younger. He's probably got a bit more top end explosiveness at this point in his career. And the Colts offensive line is certainly better than what the Ravens have got. So can you really, instead of the rushing attack being 90% quarterback, can it be quarterback and running back from that shotgun heavy type of offense? And then I'm also expecting Richardson, like, don't get me wrong, though. I'm also expecting Richardson to rush for a ton of yardage. He was on pace to do so before he got hurt versus the Texans last year. 2 rushing touchdowns, 1 on a quarterback draw. He was one-on-one with the safety, just blew right by him. Not a chance. And then another rushing touchdown where there was kind of a misdirection to create flow one way. Then Anthony Richardson rolled out the other, just burned everybody down the sideline, scored again. Eventually got banged up in that game, but Steichen knew how to change the math with Anthony Richardson and exploit defenses and open up huge creases for maybe the most athletic human being to ever play the sport. Okay. I think that, yeah, it might be rough with Richardson, but also every time he's got the ball in his hands, you are looking at the biggest freak of nature to ever touch grass. And that in and of itself, when you can just snap it and then run it with him, it does make life pretty easy. It does make life pretty easy in some ways. Now, if he gets hurt, then things get a lot more difficult. Obviously, that's going to be the number one thing to avoid, but you also can't totally avoid it. You know, like you got to let him run a little bit. It's such a good play for you. So it's going to happen, and I'm hoping that it's extremely effective. Thing I'm worried about, as well as Richardson's like footwork and maybe just general brain farts from here and there, moments from the receivers. Josh Downs is questionable. I think that he is the best security blanket that the Colts have got. Outside of him, we've already seen Richardson and Granson really struggle to connect in the preseason. Richardson threw a pick six on a miscommunication there. Granson got tied up a bit down the field, and Richardson almost threw another pick in the Broncos game. Pittman in the preseason, I don't think was always locked in. Adonai Mitchell at Texas, not always locked in terms of effort and being maybe exactly where he's supposed to be. And when he's not getting the ball, like making the most out of his route, like if he has to clear something out, he'll be like slowing up because he knows he's not getting the ball, he's not in the progression, and then it mucks everything up later. So I think without Downs there as your security blanket, that the receiving situation with Richardson could just be young and dumb and frustrating potentially. So I've kind of baked those into my expectations. I want drives that look brilliant, kind of like Levis, but probably a little bit more balanced on the air and on the ground. I think some drives are going to look great, and of course, like I'm ready to kind of eat some ugly moments, especially if Downs doesn't play. But it seems like he's getting close. It seems like he could be there at the last second, but obviously we won't know until later. Who else have we got to talk about? I know Bo Nix, but anybody before that? We'll go with Bo Nix. Well, I think that he has to look a little bit like kind of a discount Justin Herbert, I guess would be like a really big discount Justin Herbert. You know what I mean? Like really big would be my expectation for him. But he's coming out of Oregon, right? He's coming out of a system or a philosophy that sounds a little bit similar to what the story on Herbert was coming out of college. Like, oh, he just throws short. He just throws underneath. He's inefficient. Like, well, I guess with Knicks, you don't have to say inefficient, but a disproportionate amount of Herbert's balls were really, really low risk, low reward at Oregon. And the media hated him. And then he showed up his rookie game and his first game and showed, okay, he can push it a bit farther down the field. I think with Knicks, it's not going to be like Herbert because he doesn't have Herbert's arm. But you do kind of have to. I think you want to get a sense of like, oh, Bo Nix can be unleashed a little bit as an athlete, as a runner, as a playmaker, a creator. You want a couple of those, like, oh, he's really got that in him, because he is fast and he is accurate. And then also coming out of Oregon, the similarity between him and Justin Herbert, they're playing with Lombardi, Joe Lombardi, the offensive coordinator. And the thing that always drove people nuts about Lombardi in LA was, oh, there's a lot of hitches, there's a lot of routes sitting down, and there's not a lot of opportunities for yak, and this offense isn't explosive enough. Okay. I think that that will probably still be true of this Denver Broncos offense. So I'm willing to accept if Bo Nix is not lighting it up, but at least operate that system with a lot of willingness. I think Herbert, to some extent, was comfortable playing in that offense, even though it wasn't crazy explosive, because he had Keenan Allen, right, and Mike Williams, and just have them run a little out route and zip it on out to them. That's like a handoff for Justin Herbert, right? So it's not necessarily an offense that, like, Drew Brees made it work, right? When he was kind of at an older age, he was perfectly fine, just dinking and dunking and dinking and reading the triangle and exploiting the space that opens up just over and over and over again. And I think that if you do embrace that, you can, even though it's unsexy, have good offense. So with Bo Nix, like, he doesn't need to be throwing it all over the yard. I'm not expecting this, like, with Caleb Williams, I'm expecting him to actually, like, make three people miss in the backfield and then throw a touchdown in double coverage. Like, it's okay if Nix isn't making those big plays. It's okay if he's a little bit more boring. Boring can be good as long as he is getting to the right read, not passing anything up to scramble. His footwork is looking good. He's spitting it out, executing the offense like he's supposed to, like just an instrument of Sean Payton, and then maybe a little bit more with a couple runs and flashes. And against a Mike McDonald defense that my opinion on Mike McDonald's defense has gone up after watching the Ravens tonight. Okay, it might be all him. So I'm willing to say, like, yeah, it could be kind of rough for the Broncos offense as a whole. There's not a ton of talent surrounding Bo Nix. It could be a really good defensive performance. I don't know. But my expectation is not a lot of turnovers, smart, cerebral, accurate, all the things he was billed as coming out of college. I think those things can all still shine through. But does it need to be a masterclass? Does he need to even win for me to be impressed? No. Last guy to talk about, is there anybody else that is young? We'll go with Jayden Daniels. And yeah, I think that is the last guy I'll talk about. I think the number one thing I'm looking for is how he impacts the running game. That is his superpower to me. Coming out of LSU, not everybody can rush for 1,000 yards or even way more than 1,000 yards or whatever Jayden Daniels had last year. He was one of the most explosive rushing threats of all time. And I think that that's something that can translate a little bit quicker than really high-end passing ability, especially in this offense that didn't rank very highly in offensive line metrics last year, doesn't have a bunch of established names in the receiving core. Zach Ertz is the starting tight end, not crazy inspiring. Like, they're going to be facing a lot of blitzes. Like, it's okay, man. It's okay if the passing isn't 300 yards crazy productive right off the bat, but I think the running can be. I think that the kind of athlete that you are as a rookie. Like, not that you're at your best, but you got fresh legs if you're Jayden Daniels. Like, as a runner, there's no reason why you can't make a ton of impact on this game. I don't think it's as difficult to stand out or needing many years to figure it out as passing the ball. So I want this rushing offense to look very potent. I know that Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler isn't the craziest running back duo in the world, but when you look at the best running teams, it's the guys with running quarterbacks. Look at the Ravens tonight. They're going to go down as one of the best running teams ever, not because the running backs were crazy efficient tonight, but just because every quarterback scramble it picks up 10 yards, and designed QB runs are more efficient as well because there's that element of surprise, right? You're chasing the running back, and then all of a sudden, the quarterback has it at open space, and they're crazy athletes. So when we're looking back on this game, I think that I need to see good rushing results from the Washington Commanders offense. And then he's going to be tested by Bulls. He's going to be heated up. In the preseason, I described a play where the Dolphins overloaded one side of the line of scrimmage. They rushed more people than the right guard and tackle could block. And Daniels just kind of like ran out of the pocket and threw it 10 yards out of bounds. Like it was a wasted play as soon as he saw the blitz. And most of the time in the preseason, it was just RPO, hit the top of your drop, throw a hitch. That's about it. So we haven't really seen him drop back, hold the ball, manage pressure at all. In the preseason, like I thought we did with May, like I thought we did with Caleb, like I thought even Bo Nix did a little bit more than Jayden Daniels did. Then I'm expecting rough moments in that area. I'm expecting him to look bad at times. But there also needs to be flashes of, okay, it's in there. It's in, like at least one throw where it can be like, okay, it was up against the blitz here. He hung in there. He punished it. He replaced the pressure over the middle. It can't just be go balls. There needs to be a few other throws that make me say, okay, he's really got this quarterback stuff down. He needs to be accurate. Like he needs to be. I mean, he gets a lot of Lamar Jackson comps. Like Lamar Jackson under the pressure will hang in there, change the arm angle, like make something happen. Jayden has to have some throws where you can kind of see the similarities as well, I think. But again, it just needs to be a flash. It just needs to be a flash. That's all I'm looking for. It can be 5 bad plays, 1 good one. And I promise I won't be too harsh. And then, of course, I'm expecting a big completion to McLaurin. Beautiful over the shoulder, like right where it needs to be down the field. I think it's fair to expect Jayden Daniels did a few of those, considering he does it many times in every game I've ever seen him play in. So that'll be the good expectation, where I'm excited to see the first time that connects, because I think that him and McLaurin and even Dimey Brown is kind of a nice mesh of styles. Like these guys can really track the ball down the field and catch these goes. So I think that in that throw, specifically in the running, I think we'll always be at a high level with Jayden Daniels, but there needs to be some other stuff, because this throwing over the middle, handling pressure, these are my concerns. So there need to be flashes. Anyway, I think that's all the young quarterbacks I have to talk about. So I am going to take a short break here, and then we will bring on Anthony to really break down our takeaways from Ravens versus Chiefs. Here we go. All right, now let's get into that Ravens Chiefs game. Alongside me, I have Anthony Lawson. And to be honest, Anthony, I just learned your last name. I thought you were just ESQ Anthony all the time. I was scrambling in the middle of the night. I was like, oh man, I gotta figure out some way to. But it was just in your Twitter handle. I was all over your TikTok. But yeah, we are about to talk about Chiefs versus Ravens. It's a new day. It's the morning. I'm wearing different clothes than the first half of this record, so don't be shocked, everybody. How you doing? How was the first game of the year for you?
Doing pretty good. It was refreshing to finally watch real football again and see people talk about, things that actually kind of matter on the timeline, all of that. And it was a good game, too. For a little while there, I was worried it was going to be, not super close, but the Ravens battled back And even if the ending was, I guess, anticlimactic for some, depending on what outcome you wanted, it was cool overall. So I have very few complaints.
Yeah, I had the same thought where I was like, oh, this is actually about to get like messy. The Ravens are way worse than they were last year. Like this is headed towards disaster. And then at the end, they're an inch away. So how do you feel about, well, let's get a little bit more zoned in than that. What do you think the best thing about Baltimore was last night?
That's a good question. I would say that the offense did not look special enough for me to say it was something on that side of the ball. So therefore, I would say that the defense had me feeling pretty good overall. I think, they lost three different members of that coaching staff in the offseason, along with Patrick Queen. So it was kind of up in the air for some, but I personally had pretty solid expectations for this unit this year. I thought that the absence of Mike McDonald is something that's going to hurt in the long run for sure. But I mean, as we could see from the game yesterday, in the short term, it was certainly different. I believe in the first half, the Ravens had a remarkably low pressure rate. It was only like, once or twice that they were really sending funky things, but they got the job done. It was kind of reminiscent of the conference championship game in last year. There were some times where, it really looked like if the Chiefs were to convert here or to get this catch here, they could run away with it. But that defense kept them in the game, and I think that's reassuring, especially seeing what the state of the offense is right now.
Yeah, I thought the defense was obviously up and down. At the end of the day, I know Mahomes ended with like a point 0.4 EPA per attempt, but they got the key stops when they needed. And I think my big takeaway was like the defense can be streamlined a little bit. Like at the beginning of the game, they had number 40 out there, Malik Harrison, instead of Trenton Simpson. He was awful, man. Like that was probably the worst linebacker play I've ever seen. So it's like little things like that I think can be remedied pretty easily. It's like, okay, eventually they'll get their best 11 starting guys out there with Simpson and maybe a little bit more Nate Wiggins.
I would agree. I saw 40 on like Rashi Rice for a play, and it was definitely polar bear Arlington, Texas esque. But Simpson, he held it down when he was out
He
there.
did.
So
Yeah, it can't be as easy against the Ravens defense as like, oh, we'll put our best receiver in the slot and just run a slant because that's all it took in the beginning of this game. And then Simpson came out
seriously.
there and was actually able to do something against that. So it's like we need him on the field more than 35 snaps, like 15 for Harrison. I thought that was the very first like basic thing that you could fix. And then with the pressure rate, like you were saying, I thought Orr he didn't show me a lot in terms of the scheme mastery that Mike McDonald had. I don't know about you. On the rewatch, I haven't watched the all 22 yet. I know that you did that this morning. Did you see any like pressure rates that really stood out to you, or pressure packages that really stood out to you?
No, and in the first half, I think I can pull it up right here. Give me a second. The amount of times that the Ravens blitzed, it was 1 of 16. It was a 6.3% blitz rate, which is the lowest by a Baltimore defense in a game since 2018. In the first half, Patrick Queen, whom I watched the conference championship game back as well, he had a decent amount of pressures in that game, or at least attacks at the line of scrimmage. I think he only attacked Mahomes once in that first half too. I don't have numbers for the second half, but it didn't feel like things changed too much. So it definitely seemed dialed back, but not ineffective as a defense as a whole.
Yeah, I think that it was more. This was my thought watching the game. It was more about getting pressure, just rushing for like a basic kind of vanilla type of look. I'm not totally sure what they had going on the back end, but I don't know if I love that for the Ravens, but there were some moments like Ajabo had some nice rushes. If he can be something, that could be huge for them. Travis Jones, I thought, caused a lot of issues in the middle against Tooney and even Creed Humphrey. He had some wins. So there were like some flashes, and Orr is one of the youngest defensive coordinators. So it's like if you have some guys who you can put out there that can get pressure just in a vanilla four-man rush, it does, I think, bode kind of well for them down the line if Orr can kind of add on some of the more exotic stuff as he gets more comfortable.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, anytime you get a sack on Mahomes, it's like catching a wild Pokemon or something like that. It's pretty rare, and the fact that they were able to get anything without having to throw the kitchen sink at him, I mean, it looks good. Even Michael Pierce, he had like some moments of disruption up the middle and stuff. I mean, it was cool to watch, even if it was definitely less flashy than the past.
What about the Chiefs' offense on the other side of things?
I mean, I had to remind myself that they don't even have Hollywood right now. That's how, efficient it looked overall against a defense that you and I both think is pretty solid still. One thing that I noticed, especially after watching back that conference championship game, is that last year the Chiefs had a lot of trouble throwing over the middle of the field right around 10 yards or even just a bit under that. It did not come easy. And one of the only times that they really did anything in that game last year was they had to get into a bunch look and they kind of motioned that outside guy in right at the snap, and he was able to kind of lose the defender that was tracking him. And I thought that the Chiefs had a lot of bunch in this game that had some pretty effective results, and it got Mahomes a lot of passes over the middle. It seems like a good way to create access for your offense against this Ravens defense. And also Rice in general got some stuff over
Yeah.
the middle too.
Yeah, they looked crazy explosive. I mean, the burst that Rice has when he gets the ball, the burst that Xavier Worthy has when he gets the ball. I do think that big plays are kind of back in Kansas City like you imagined. They didn't hit too much in the form of like a deep shot, like a go ball, but I mean, it has that specific play hasn't been there for a while. They get their explosives in other ways. This was definitely a much more potent explosive offense than I think we've seen in the past, which is the main thing that you're looking for. I could have done without that crunch time Carson Steele touch.
I would
That
agree.
one was a little bit. I know Roquan Smith when he saw that get handed off, probably his eyes got like thank
Lunch.
God, like thank God. But yeah, I thought it was a decent performance from them. Although they did kind of struggle to run the ball a little bit, even though Pacheco looked good, but the explosiveness and just the lack of mistakes on their part also stood out. I mean, there were a lot of new rules this year. The kickoff, obviously, the alignment rules with you need 7 people on the line, and that's going to be strict. The Ravens had all kinds of problems with it, and the Chiefs really didn't. And it was pretty much smooth right from the get-go. I think that just speaks to everything that they've got going on in that organization, whereas like even a great organization like the Ravens were completely befuddled by it. That was another big takeaway of mine about the Chiefs, but it looked pretty normal. Like Mahomes was making people miss and hitting people downfield. I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
too
I totally agree. There was kind of like what you just said right there. What makes them interesting in the game last night is specifically when you have them go band for band with the Chiefs with what they were doing. I mean, the Ravens. Sorry, we'll talk about them more in a second, I'm sure, but the amount of 12 personnel they used, it was pretty unprecedented for Baltimore with the guys that they have. I mean, statistically, I think they had more plays of 12 personnel in the first half than they had in like any game last season and stuff. And the Chiefs,
52%,
yeah,
52.7.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
And
last year.
the Chiefs, in theory, they're not supposed to be that kind of team. I mean, we know when they're healthy, they've got Hollywood back, and they'll have Worthy, and they'll have Rice, and they have Kelsey, so no need to put 2 tight ends out there. But last night, that's what they were doing in the absence of Hollywood. And they were doing a lot of the same stuff as the Ravens overall. I mean, they had the same personnel. They were both going, screen for screen as well. And that's another area where the Chiefs really shine in terms of their execution and just the lack of mistakes. Like you said, the Ravens, they're kind of doing the same stuff unintentionally as Kansas City, but the results were pretty far from the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was very refreshing to see what you talked about. Baltimore actually in 12 personnel. Now we'll see if Mark Andrews remains good enough to be to justify being in 12 personnel at above a 50% clip. But in the AFC Championship game last year, they only had 6 snaps of 12 personnel the entire game, and hypothetically, that is your best combination of players. Andrews, likely, Zay Flowers, and then pick whoever else your wide receiver is. It's kind of thin. Bateman, probably, right? So that was a huge key for me is like see both of them on the field because I think they're both capable of great things. And let's talk a little bit about Likely's performance.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
He looks like an all-pro in this offense. I think that's the number one thing Ravens fans can feel good about is like this dude is like that is not a normal tight end performance.
I'm ready to start a dialogue. Yeah, I mean, especially when you compared everything that he did in the offense to the stuff that Andrews did, because there were a lot of times where the Ravens would hop into 11 personnel and they'd keep Likely out there instead of Andrews, or then they'd go Andrews instead of Likely and stuff. And when you see them occupying the same role, that's where, to me, it became very clear that this guy, he's ready to take a jump. He was often Lamar's, dump-off option when they're trying to push the ball downfield, and he looks far more explosive than Andrews with the ball in his hands on the ground. There were some times where they were, kind of motioning him or pulling him to be a lead blocker in the run game. And, I mean, he had that one pancake that I'm sure everyone saw.
Yeah.
And he had another really good one, too.
Early
and then
in the game,
wide receiver screens as well, he blocked pretty well, and Mark Andrews kind of looked like a turnstile or a cone or whatever you want to call it on some of those. So, yeah, I'm all here for Likely.
Yeah, his blocking was really what stood out to me. Is like, yeah, you can receive. There's a lot of tight ends who can receive like he can and make people miss, and they're kind of that pseudo receiver tight end hybrid guy. But like, Likely was actually bringing it, and then the yak play up the sideline, like stopping me and my friends watching that game, like all made a very, very loud noise when he came to that dead stop. So. I'm excited for him in Flowers. I do think that him looking like as good as he did is massive. It's a massive, massive positive because if he didn't, like, what would they do? How would you grade Lamar's performance?
I liked it a lot, and I think I liked it even more when I watched it back from the coach's angles. I thought the big thing that stuck out to me was his pocket presence, especially in comparison to the conference championship game last year. I thought that last year, the last time he faced the Chiefs, when he would get overwhelmed in the pocket, he would start working backwards. He would try to back up and go around the offensive line. But I really felt like he did a good job working up yesterday. And in addition to that, I also thought he was pretty decisive in those muddy pockets. There was a lot of times, and I mean, some of this is game script stuff, I guess you could argue, just with the Ravens trailing against the Chiefs last year. But then again, they were trailing yesterday, so I guess that's not too different. But it felt like Lamar was big play hunting sometimes in that conference championship game. He's really holding on to the ball. He's saying, these guys got to get open. I need to let them get open. I don't know if you want to argue that the reason he was more decisive is because he's got these slightly slower guys with the 12 personnel and stuff, so he knows quicker if they're open or not. But whatever the reason may be, I felt like the time to throw in pressured situations was a bit quicker. I think he only took one sack all day. Meanwhile, his pressure to sack was like 28% in last year. So it stuck out to me for sure.
The fact that he took so few sacks in that offensive situation is kind of unbelievable looking back at it. And I think by Lamar's standards, maybe we could say it wasn't the greatest game because at the end of the day, that throw, especially to Likely. The other ones I thought were a bit tough. I know Zay Flowers looked like he was wide open. That one should have been hit as well. But just the angle Lamar was throwing at there made it a lot harder than just a missed
For
throw.
sure, yeah.
Right. But with the throw to Likely, he took half the time off the clock. He had it all lined up, like it was open, and that was just a bad sail, and it got Likely hurt, like diving for it too as well. So just from that throw alone, when you had a chance to beat the Chiefs and it kind of sailed, it's easy to take a ton of points off the overall performance. But, I mean, I thought the defense had flashes, but overall didn't stop much. And the offense, like Derrick Henry wasn't the reason that they almost beat the Chiefs. Like the receivers weren't really the reason that they almost beat the Chiefs. It was pretty much solely Lamar Jackson that they had a chance at the end, and the fact that he was able to navigate extremely muddy pockets the entire game, just toying with defenders off the edge, like backing up and then stepping forward and then backing up again. It's one of my favorite things to watch this sport, when he just kind of plays with the running back's pass protection. They did it with Chris Jones at the end of the game. I don't know why the line was sliding away from Jones and leaving the back to block him, but Lamar just kind of working off the angle of the block beautifully at the end. Like it was nice to see over the course of the entire game how elusive he still is. And Another big takeaway about Lamar's performance I just could not believe the amount of contact that he was
Oh
taking
my
over the
gosh.
course of this game. He was laying it all on the line.
It was insane. I mean, he lowered his shoulder. I didn't even realize till I watched it back on back-to-back plays in the first quarter. And he didn't stop as the game went on. And I remember a storyline from this offseason being Ozempic Lamar. He's smaller now.
Yeah.
Theoretically, he will be taking less contact and he will be more elusive. And I mean, he was elusive, don't get me wrong. 200 passing yards, 100 rushing yards. I'm pretty sure the only guy who did that last year was Lamar once. So this was a pretty good Lamar game statistically and on the ground and all of that. But the contact was unreal. And there were times where I didn't know if it was a Monken thing or if it was a Lamar decision, but like he runs around one play, takes a big hit at the end. Very next play, they just run him right up the middle effectively, and he takes another hit. And I mean, it definitely doesn't feel sustainable, but I'd be lying if I said it was not very fun to watch.
No, it was sick. It was absolutely sick. I don't think he slid the entire night. Like, he would duck out of bounds, right? But I think when
Yeah.
he was running, I mean, he had a running back's mentality. He was following his blocks, getting north and south as far as he possibly could. I loved his run early in the game. Like, it was a QB power play, and I think he was following 62 and just followed him, like, right on his hip, and then he got hit and just, like, jumped forward and,
Oh
like,
yeah, and he was
dove.
pushing
Yeah.
him as he ran too.
Yeah. No, but I thought it was memorable. I will never forget that one from Lamar Jackson. Even though they came up a bit short at the end, I thought he was intense. Body language wise, before and after the play, and just during the play, like he truly laid it all on the line. So I thought it was a performance where, like, projecting the Ravens offense going forward, like, yeah, the offensive line probably isn't so great. The guards, we'll see. They kind of got cooked. I think streamlining the snap counts on offense also needs to be a thing. I didn't love, like, Roger Rosengarten entering the game cold and then, like, having to block Chris Jones one-on-one. But, like, I don't know, man. There's a lot of bad defenses out there that are probably going to get absolutely cooked by Lamar this year.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the big worries you have with this team are worries that only really show up on the offensive end when you get to the playoffs and that pressure is on. And you'd like to think that, with 17 more regular season games, or 16, that they'll have some time to figure that stuff out. There were certainly some fine spots and then some worrying ones. A stat that kind of stuck out to me, and I wasn't really sure where to attribute it, and I'm still not totally sure because I only watched this back once, but so throws of 10 plus yards, there were certainly times where it felt like Lamar kind of just missed guys on these super deep ones. But in general, this is something that Lamar has struggled with against the Chiefs in these last two games.
Definitely.
It was pretty brutal in the conference championship last year. He was 2 of 10 with a pick on those. And so that's not good. I'm not even saying like 15 plus or anything here. I'm just saying 10 plus. And last night, he was 4 of 11, and he did sail some balls that, I mean, they weren't necessarily wide open receivers, but the accuracy wasn't as pinpoint as we know he can be. And one of those 4 completions, it wasn't exactly in structure. It was that likely touchdown where Lamar's, holding it, running, completing. And so I wasn't totally sure, I mean, part of that's the line. I think Lamar's time to pressure in the first half, it was right around 2 seconds. It wasn't easy. I mean, these big 12 personnel tight ends, I mean, sure, they're capable of getting up and down there, but I didn't like seeing the way that these Chiefs guys were matching Mark Andrews. It was a bit discouraging. So yeah, in general, that's something I do want to see from this Ravens offense going forward, is just get a bit more going for 10 plus. I mean, Lamar's passing chart, it looked like my backyard. Like there's just a line on one side, like a fence, and then like a little bush on the other side of those wide receiver screens and whatever.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal going down the field. I cannot lie. That miss to Likely, where it looked like he was running between the 2 safeties and Bolton was kind of carrying him, that was a touchdown, and
Yeah.
it ended up in the hands of a corner. Like, it was lucky that one wasn't just picked off. There was that throw to Bateman that was completed earlier, but before that, like, he was kind of running down the sideline and Lamar didn't really throw it catchable. It seemed like his deep shots were kind of landing in random locations, and like you said,
Yeah.
that was totally the case in the conference championship as well. It's just not that's the thing that's probably keeping him from being in that Mahomes' tier is the ball control from him. I mean, he has a great arm. He's crazy creative. He can run. I think he is accurate in the short and intermediate ranges, but the ball control down the field it didn't seem up to par at all. And that was a problem. That was a problem and probably will continue to be until he shows otherwise. What else is there? There's the Chiefs secondary to talk about. I thought they played pretty well without L'Jarius Sneed.
Yeah, no, I was expecting, maybe some, I guess not growing pains because this is overall, a pretty veteran unit. But I don't know. I thought maybe the Ravens would, say we're finally free from this guy who's going to jam us at the line every time. Let's make these wide receiver screens work because this is something they had been trying last year. They tried it again. But it wasn't the most effective thing in the world. I mean, these Chiefs DBs, they remain extremely physical. And I know that's just kind of what they bring to the table. Most people saw that Worthy clip from camp and stuff. I think it was Nate Tice of Yahoo Sports. He wrote a whole piece about how these guys are just, kind of bred to be physical. It didn't look like they missed a beat. And, you were just talking about how Lamar's got, a pretty spectacular arm over most parts of the field. One of the ways you really appreciate that is seeing how accurate some of these tight window throws of his are, and then the fact that they're not completed. Because these Chiefs, they know how to stick right on some of these Ravens guys. It's always very impressive to watch.
Yeah, McDuffie looked like all-pro. I thought he played a fantastic game. He got beat once by Flowers early, and then after that, I think it was kind of all McDuffie. And then their boundary corners as well. Like, there really wasn't much on them. They tried him deep one time. Who was it? I think it was Joshua Williams, or was it Jalen Watson? I think it was 35.
Jalen Watson
had that
on that the Flowers one, right?
Yeah,
That's what I'm talking about. Those Lamar that was a pretty great throw, and it just I thought that was completed when I saw the ball, and no, he got his hand in there and broke that thing up.
Yeah, so I thought that was maybe the most encouraging thing from the Chiefs. Like, Chris Jones is going to do his thing, but the fact that they were able to hold up on the back end as well as they did, they weren't exploited for any real big go balls down the sideline or anything like that. So, yeah, the Snead effect was not as real as I thought. And then I guess the last takeaway I had was that Leo Chanel is good.
I was going to say
I'm excited to see him. Yeah, he's a beast.
Yeah, no, I think it was Cody Alexander brought up their splits of the different types of personnel they were using. It was nickel 31% of the time, base 25, 3-3-5 25, and then odd 13%. And when they weren't in nickel, Chanel was kind of not the X factor. I mean, there's some other better guys on this defense, but he was making a huge difference. He had 2 different deflections on Lamar. He had QB spies that were pretty important.
Yeah.
He put his hand in the dirt sometimes. I believe on 1 3rd down, he dropped back into like a deep middle or something like that. That's a lot from him. And he's not someone in my mind who has the deepest bag. So I got to give credit to Spags as well. I mean, it was cool to watch.
Yeah, and he rushed the pass. Like, he's kind of a pseudo defensive lineman for them a lot of the
big,
time.
yeah.
He'll line up right on the line of scrimmage. He'll mug up or even just play kind of outside linebacker and rush the passer. So the fact that he was able to do everything, and you can say, like, obviously no one player wins the game, but that deflection at the end of the first half saved a clear touchdown, which would have made it a Ravens win if they had another touchdown on the board and could have just kicked a field goal at the end. So, yeah, he looked like a revelation. Everybody on that Chiefs defense looked good. I mean, my main takeaway was, okay, the Chiefs might really three-peat. I wasn't quite sure. I didn't quite want to believe. Like, it seems kind of impossible to get the breaks 3 years in a row. But after watching that and all the breaks that they got, Mahomes mossing, Trenton Simpson after the deflection, like Tucker missing a field goal, just everything that went on, it just is like, man, this team really does feel as inevitable as ever. And that's my big macro takeaway.
Yeah, I saw somebody make the joke. Do you know that scene from Toy Story where it's like Buzz Lightyear, they're zooming out on him in the toy store and there's like a million of him? And it was just the quote, man, we really took the Chiefs down to the wire in this one. Maybe we'll get them next time. The amount of times that teams end up saying that and then it doesn't happen because these guys are just different, especially late in the games. It's hard to imagine them being stopped. I mean, we really haven't seen it in close games aside from the Joe Shiesty incident, and we know the fallout from that. I mean,
Joe Shiesty.
If that's enough to get him, the aura boost that he got for like a full year, I mean, that shows you how rare it is. It's not easy to stop this team in close games.
No. If you had to pick a team to do it, now I would have said the Ravens a week ago, but now I don't know if I would. What's the next team on the list? Do you think that you're optimistic about in the AFC?
I agree with you about having wanted the Ravens before this, but as someone else made the joke, Lamar, at this point right now, it feels like he has that dog in him, but not the clutch gene, which is an interesting combo because, you generally think the two go hand in hand. But, until, I mean, he's a good quarterback overall, but it's hard to imagine them overcoming the Chiefs just after seeing how it's gone down the last two times. I would guess, at this point, I'm looking for who has the dog in them and the clutch gene. Maybe C.J. Stroud. I mean, that guy's always very cool, calm, and collected, and he's got a pretty good team this year. And as we know, the guys who give Mahomes a run for their money, I'm really just talking about like Burrow here, but it's that strong defense, very poised, cool guy who's pretty good at the end of the games with a pretty mean receiving core. And the Texans check those boxes. So,
yeah, I got the Titans. I think Levis can do it.
I mean, he does have that dog in him. There's no doubt about that.
Lamar fell. I think Levis is the only one who can do it now. Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us. This has been another episode of Your Football Opinion. Of course, you know where to subscribe at this point. You can find me on socials at Theo NFL, on Twitter, on TikTok, PFN. Of course, follow their content at PFN365 everywhere. Anthony, where can people find your work?
I am at ESQ Anthony on TikTok. ESQ is short for Esquire. That was my personnel package name in high school, as the Esquire package, because I was smart but not that good. And then on top of that, I'm at Esquire Anthony 1 on Twitter, I believe. And then I'm also writing on Substack. It should be another, Esquire Anthony variant, but I believe the name of the page is Back to the Couch. So those are my places.
What does the smart package look like? Do you just have you doing
the gritty, hardworking
calculations or
blockers and all of that stuff? I got, 2 catches in my career. It was the Hunter Renfrow zigs. And after that, I'd go out there and I'd do my best to block. But I don't think I was that good of a blocker. I think it was more of a process of elimination, This guy can't really separate, but he must be good at something. I did sometimes, show up after practice and help my coach plot our other packages and stuff. So that was more where I shined. I did throw a double pass once, too. I had an arm, but it got picked off, so.
An arm, but it got picked off. You sound like you're the Josh Allen comp. We'll be very gracious. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome. It was great to talk to you after seeing your work on TikTok for such a long time.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's great to be on here.